My friends, welcome back to the Shema podcast. I appreciate your listenership as always. And once again, I have a great episode lined up. So the way I'll start this episode before we bring our guest on, as I've mentioned to you in the past, that at the age of 40, I did a total 180. I went from being a very devout atheist to basically knowing that I wanted to be a Torah observant Jew. Everyone thought I was absolutely nuts. And they asked, what caused you to do a 180? I told them that was my first Torah book. And they said, what was that? I said, it was a book on quantum mechanics, because quantum mechanics helped me understand and dismiss a lot of assumptions I had to the world around me. One was that the only way you could know something to be true is if you could detect it with your sensory perception. And people that believe things to be true, they could not detect with their sensory perception that the root of that was probably some type of psychological disorder. But it was through this book that they were proving the limitations of eyesight and hearing. And they proved that there's so much more of the world around us that we are not able to detect. So that sort of like basically tore apart my hashkafa, my worldview from the very beginning. And then they started showing the scientific process for determining and proving the existence of a quark, even though you can't detect it with the sensory perception. And that is what provided me the framework for going out and proving that there was a creator. And that led me to then research whether or not the Torah was true. And for the last 6 years, I've been out doing this podcast for one reason: to convince Jews that their Torah came from their creator and it contains all the wisdom that they need to know. But it's interesting that I've been now in a community for 4.5 years. And a little over 2 years ago, my friend told me he was starting a breakaway school. Thing about being in a frum communities, there's always a breakaway something. But he was starting a school for a group of 7th and 8th graders that he wanted some more challenging academics. And so I agreed to teach finance and economics for them when they were in the 7th grade. 8th grade rolls around, and we were continuing with that curriculum, but that I was going to fill in and start teaching mathematics because they lost their mathematics teacher. And I was asked to teach them geometry. And the students said, why do we need to learn geometry? And I said, that's a fair question, and you should never feel ashamed about asking why I need to learn something. And I made my pitch. I said, look, last year we studied financial statements so you could learn how to measure the health and growth trajectory of a business. And we learned macroeconomics. You can learn how to measure the health of an economy. Now we're going to learn how to measure space. And they weren't really convinced by the end of that class period. However, the next day they show up to class and said, Dr. Dan, they gave me a doctorate. They call me Dr. Dan. So they said, Dr. Dan, we're sold. We want to learn geometry now. And I said, what changed? And they said, well, we were studying the Gemara with Rabbi Nagel, and we were covering Sukkos, and in there is geometry, and it talked about pi and all the things you were mentioning we were going to learn. So now we're sold. And I'm thinking, like, that has to be your proof to want to learn something? Okay, fair enough. To me, it was endearing coming from the world I came from. But then when I started teaching macroeconomics this year to the seniors, I knew day one, I had to start off and prove to them why economics was an extension of Torah. And it seems to be like I'm selling two different things to two different groups. I'm going to Jews who were not exposed to Torah and saying, you got to learn Torah. I'm going back to my teaching and teaching them that everything in the science and the world around them is part of Torah. You know, we learned from Rabbi Ken Spiro when I asked him to clarify for everyone what is Torah. And he explained that Torah, the translation of the word, is instructions. And he went on to quote Maimonides and say, it is instructions for the 613 mitzvos and how to apply them. Well, the application of Torah in the world requires an understanding of the sciences and mathematics. Like I was walking around my home in Shabbos looking at the Sabbath mode on the oven that my wife was so happy to have returned to her after living in the rental home for the last 4 years that was built in the 80s. But how do our rabbis today know that the Sabbath oven mode was permissible? They had to know the science behind it. They had to know the mechanics behind it. The way to apply our Torah in the world is to have a comprehensive understanding of science and mathematics. So the gentlemen that Hashem, my executive producer, got me in touch with, Rabbi Joel Padowitz and Rabbi Jonathan Sassen, wrote this amazing book called The Science Behind the Mishnah. I was so delighted when I was put in contact with them, and they wrote a book to basically bridge these two worlds, and I think do such a great service to Klei Israel in showing them that it's not Torah and then the other stuff. It's everything that's true in the world is Torah.
Welcome to the Shema Podcast, the podcast for the perplexed, where Torah insights, intertwined through personal stories, as well as interviews with leading Torah scholars, demonstrate the empowering qualities of Torah and mitzvot. For more great Torah learning through Torch, the Torah Outreach Center of Houston, go to torchweb.org. Now to the show.
Rabbis, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you being here.
It's a pleasure.
So if we could just get started, if you could each just tell the audience a little bit about your background, so they can sort of get a feel for what you came to this with and what sort of compelled you to want to write this text.
Hi, this is Rabbi Jonathan Sassen. So I'll start first since I'm the oldest guy around here. So I've always been interested in science since I was, I remember when I was 10 years old, I wanted to be an astronomer and then a geologist and then et cetera, et cetera. And I did science only science at school as much as I could. I was brought up in a barely religious family. We kept Pesach kind of and went to shul on Yom Kippur and fasted, but that was just about it. This is in England. Anyway, so I went on to Oxford University and did metallurgy and material science, which is a degree I chose because it had lots of physics and chemistry and mathematics. And I didn't want to drop any of those. And while I was in university, I met some very good Jews and became from while I was in university. And so after university, I went on to Israel, came to Israel, where I live now, and learned for a few years at Chappelle's Darchei Noam. And then I got a job through rather miraculous means, should we say, but that's a long story. That's not for now. Working for a company that develops batteries, doing electrochemistry. And again, it was a very up my street kind of job because it involved a lot of maths and chemistry, material science and metallurgy, and I'm still there. And still, we've been like a perpetual startup doing many, many different projects for many years. And so as Hashem guided me through the many years I had there, I had the opportunity to work only half-time. Okay, I'm now, as the chief scientist, work only half-time there. And this was my opportunity to do something which I'd always dreamed of, which is to marry together my science side and my Yiddishkeit side. And I started planning to write a sefer on various science insights in Chumash and things like that. It wasn't going so well. And I found myself in the back of a car going to a wedding with Rabbi Joel Padowitz sometime in 2018. And you'll find out from Joel that he is an extremely multi-talented guy who has no time in his hands for this, but he always dreamed about it as well in connection with Mishnayos. So we teamed up together on teaching science and teaching Mishnayos. And we've been doing that since 2018. Took a couple of years off with Corona since we couldn't get to our computers because the kids were on the whole time. And here we are.
Beautiful. Rabbi Padowitz, tell us a little bit about yourself as well, please.
Sure. So my name is Joel Padowitz. I grew up in San Diego, originally from South Africa. From a young age was in San Diego, also from not especially observant family. But and also, like Jonathan, was sort of in my younger years, sort of really drawn to the sciences and anticipated I'd be a scientist. I got a lot of flack in my sixth grade yearbook. I wrote that I wanted to go to MIT and be a physicist, and all the kids thought that was very, very funny. When I was 16, I finished high school, and I've been accepted to MIT, and that was my plan, to go be a physicist at MIT. But because I was young, and I sort of struck this deal with my parents, funny story now for this minute, I took a year to travel between high school and university. And in that year, I was traveling around, ended up along the way in Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, and I came to first to Or Sameach, where I met a few impressive, like, scientific, and Rabbi David Gottlieb, who's a professor of mathematical philosophy, philosophy of mathematics. And at the time, Rabbi Akiva Tatz was there. He's a doctor. And then I ended up going to Esha Torah. There was another fellow there who was quite well known in the circles also, Dr. Gerald Schroeder, and the fellow named Kiva Eisenberg, Dr. Eisenberg, and in all these places. So I had this very big advantage from most kids that walk through the gates of Or Sameach and Esha Torah, which was that I, like you, Dan, was a sort of a devout atheist, but I had a big advantage in that I really thought I knew why I was an atheist, and I was pretty well versed in the arguments for why there's no such thing as a God and so on. So that put me in a big advantage because sort of when I got to these schools, I was like sort of thought I'd be there for a day or something. In fact, I'll tell you the truth. This is a great story. I ended up going to yeshiva. I went to the central bus station in Jerusalem, and I say I'm looking for the yeshiva. And they're laughing, and I didn't get the joke. I thought there was this one place in Jerusalem, like the yeshiva of, like the Academy of Athens. There was like the yeshiva of Jerusalem. I'm looking for the yeshiva to find the old wise rabbis, Anyway, so long story short, I had a lot of questions, but they were answered, really to my satisfaction, sort of despite myself, to my great frustration. And a very long story short, I ended up sticking around in yeshiva in Esha Torah. I did not go back to university for a long time. I studied basically in various yeshivas and kols for another 12 years, became a rabbi, and then I ended up going to London, and I was a rabbi. I ran Esha Torah's community there for young professionals for a number of years. When I was a student back in yeshiva, so I was always telling the rabbis, one day I'll find a way to, get back to sciences and find a way to, bring that scientific stuff in service of the Jewish people. And they all said, yes, of course you will. Just keep studying, and of course you'll figure out a way. And I don't think anyone took me too seriously. I don't know but in any case, even I didn't later on in my life think it would come to be. But when I came back, when I finished my time in London, we sort of felt we had to come back to Israel before my kids were too old. So we family relocated back to Yerushalayim, or in Beit Shemesh, where we are today. And I started teaching Mishnah, amongst other things, here in Beit Shemesh. And I saw there was sort of I got interested in teaching sort of as a supplement to the Mishnah classes, teaching the science behind the Mishnah. And then we had this fateful car ride together, me and Jonathan, and we talked about our joint vision. So we ended up, after 6 years, putting together this book, The Science Behind the Mishnah, which we think is pretty innovative. We think it's pretty much, as you put it, a pretty unconventional combination of Torah and science. In fact, Jonathan and I have been really tickled. In America, the right-wing Orthodox schools are looking to it as a textbook for their science classes, like in Lakewood, and the modern Orthodox high schools are looking at it as a supplement to their Kodesh, their Torah curriculum. So it really it's something that straddles those two worlds. And it's been a really a pleasure with Jonathan to put it together and now to see it being taken on like wildfire.
That's amazing. So it seemed like this would be a strong curriculum for young people. I assume that's your target audience, although I say that while I spend a lot of Shabbos reading a lot of this, because there's a lot of things in here. I was sort of forgetting and then relearning again and learning for the first time. So, and I think it is beautiful that you have tied everything into the Mishnah, because I don't know if what I experienced is sort of systemic throughout a lot of the Jewish communities, but it does seem like there is this bifurcation of these fields of Torah and the sciences. Is that something that's more systemic than what I've experienced here?
I think it's pretty universally the case. In my impression, maybe Jonathan will tell me you think otherwise, is that there's a sort of pervasive mistrust of science and the scientific agenda in a good portion of the frum world, that they perceive that scientific enterprise as somehow having this agenda to undermine belief in Hashem and the religion. And there may be some truth to that, but it's a lot more complex than just that, of course.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, there definitely are scientists who use science to undermine religion, but there are also plenty of scientists who use science to support religion. It's one of those tools that you can use it whichever way you want. There are facts and then there are opinions.
One of the things where I felt like such a fool after realizing the truth is that, one of the arguments of the atheists is the whole idea of the discovery that the universe is expanding and therefore had a beginning. And then I was like, sort of came across something where it's like, no, the The old, really good argument for atheism was that the universe is eternal and infinite, and therefore doesn't need a creator. And it's like, they discovered the Big Bang, we're able to mathematically prove that, and all the rabbis are like, we told you so. And then I guess the atheistic community said, well, that's now our new argument. So they're just trying to avoid reality. And I felt like sort of a sucker for not recognizing that if the universe is finite and not eternal, then the only cause and effect to be an entity that is eternal and infinite. So you're right. It can be used either other way. And actually, one of the other books I had read before quantum mechanics, I had a buddy of mine who was a fellow atheist. And I asked him to pick out my curriculum because I would always wake up in the morning and learn to sort of exercise my mind. I said, you pick it out. I always seem to gravitate towards economics. And he's the one who recommended that book and also one on natural selection. Now, of course, I could see how the front community would sort of revolt back from a book on natural selection because they're trying to use that to prove that there's no creator and we all evolved from inanimate material. But they all have in that book I read huge gaps in making that equation. But the whole idea of natural selection is what gave me the framework for putting together a hypothesis that there's a creator. So it actually all worked in my favor, but I can see, especially in the modern world, how the scientists I think a lot of scientists who want to prove that there is no creator sort of start with an idea and try to push it forward. So how do you you touched on this already, but in the Jewish community, teaching them how to extract what is true, what has been proven, and make people feel comfortable that it's not the entire scientific community, as both because you're part of the scientific community that's trying to push an agenda that there's no creator. What would you say to a leading educator right now that they can learn about Hashem's world and not be improperly influenced by people that have an agenda like that?
My co-author has this very nice way of looking at this, which is that, there's the low-lying fruits here. Okay, we have here a beautiful way to make a connection with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, with all of the science which He has revealed to us, which is a tremendous amount. Okay, and it's an absolutely unbelievable amount of science which we looked at from both shallowly and extremely deeply, and there's an incredible amount of wisdom there. And I just tell people, look at that, look at all of this, and because there's, some corner somewhere in science that seems to contradict the Torah, okay, is no reason to throw out everything else, because there can never be a contradiction. The science so easily so easily proves a Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Torah is so obviously from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so they both had the same author. So if there is a contradiction, then that contradiction is arising from our understanding of one or the other. Okay, and just like when okay, it's a kasha. Okay, we go on. When you come to a kasha in the Gemara, and okay, it's a kasha. Next stuff. Throughout the whole thing, because you have a kasha somewhere. And so it's that's what I say is just look at the vast amount of science and Yiddishkeit, the Havdil, but look at it all, and it all can bring you close to Kadosh Baruch Hu, and just don't pay attention to any stirot. Okay, and if somebody pushes me, I say, there are answers to all of these stirot. There are many answers. Some of these answers contradict each other. Okay, I'm not going there. I don't know. I know I'm no better than the people who come up with yet another answer. Which is actually, this is something that we have the Rav, who also was a big inspiration for this Sefer, which is Rav Chaim Linowitz Zatzal, who's the Rav of our shul. He was saying there's absolutely no nafkamina whatsoever. There's no halachic repercussions whatsoever to any kind of contradiction that you're going to find. So just ignore it, move on. It happens. It doesn't matter. If you want to look at all the answers, fine. You can make a long list of the answers to the contradictions. And each day you can choose a different one you're going to believe in.
Fair enough. Makes sense. How about you, Rabbi
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, if you don't mind. So,
please.
So I faced that very question posed towards me a number of times. I did something kind of unusual in that I became religious, went to yeshiva for a good amount of time, and then went to university afterwards, sort of experiencing that, for all we just said about the attitudes in the firm world regarding science and secular education. My experience has sort of been that it's been treif l'chadchila, but mahadran b'diavad, meaning that but that it's sort of taboo to go there because the dangers involved. But after the fact, it's very potentially beneficial and additive to the Jewish community. So I think when we talk about just educational frameworks, I'm going to be a little philosophical for a second, if you don't mind, because I think your question really gets to the heart of probably the most important issue we'll discuss today. So educational institutions are really giving three things over. They're conveying frameworks and methods and information. And that's true for a yeshiva, and that's also true for university. And I think you have to differentiate between the frameworks and on the one hand, and then the methods and the information on the other hand, because the information that's taught in a university or in a yeshiva is rarely hard to reconcile, with some exceptions. But the frameworks, really, the perspectives are really at loggerheads, and that's the issue, I think. The scientific enterprise is really built on this assumption. It's built on skepticism. It's built on the assumption that we start assuming kind of we know nothing, and we build up from there. And therefore, it sort of breeds skepticism, and it's healthy to be a skeptic in the academic world. And the yeshiva framework is based on faith. We want to start with faith, and then we want to build on that. So what happens is when the two intersect, they intersect sort of in an uneven way. What happens is the scientific, first of all, from the scientific framework. So they're kind of approaching it how you suggested. You're looking to say, listen, we have what they call like the God of the gaps. That's the expression. That meaning that you say, listen, there's certain things we can't explain about the world, so we need God. We need to invoke God. That's where God lives, where we can't explain with science. And that orientation is really antithetical to how Jonathan and I want to present the whole confluence of Torah and science, because that puts Torah and science at exactly they're adversarial, right? Whatever you can figure out with science, it leaves less and less space for God. So God and science are in contest for who can explain stuff, and that's foolish, and it's wrong, and it's terrible. The origins of the God of the Gaps approach, actually listed recently in an essay by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, just saw this year actually, is in the story of Pharaoh and his advisors. So they say, wow, this is miracle of blood, big deal, we can do that too. You see, and miracle of frogs, big deal, we can do that too. Here there's lice, we can't do it ourselves. This must be the finger of God. Now this is God of the Gaps. We've been stumped. This is a trick we can't pull off ourselves. So this now must be God. And that's a very not Jewish way of thinking. If you look at all the philosophers, Rambam, for example, Rasajigo and others, they make the central point of our faith, which is we don't believe the Torah is true because of miracles or because of rational arguments. We believe in the Torah's veracity first and foremost because of the actual revelation itself. It's not a God of the gaps. We're not looking to explain things if we can when we're stuck. No, there's a holistic explanation of the whole thing, which is based on revelation. And if you're serious about is there a God and is the Torah true, the Jewish way of coming to that is first look at the Jewish claims for the revelation, and is that a reliable claim? That's how a Jewish person should approach the philosophical question in the 21st century, not looking for, and then once you have that framework, then you can look at other questions like you raised, like, do we need to come up with an explanation for natural selection? Does that teach us something we didn't know before that impacts on God or not? Or the origin of the universe. So if you come, and like the examples you saw, if we're stuck saying, well, how do we get here? So we say, we can explain it. There was a beginning called the Big Bang. Who needs God anymore? And the Torah believing Jews like, what are you talking about? We've been, as exactly you said, we've been saying Bereshis. The Ramban says that's the beginning of space, time, energy, and matter. That's you took our lines from us. We're saying, and so on. So I think in terms of the relationship, in terms of your specific question of how a person should know what to believe and not to believe. So I think he needs to not get bogged down with the details and information until first he clarifies his framework of, in this context, the Jewish framework. You have to decide if you're making a formal investigation, do you believe or not believe, to see if the Jewish arguments are true. You have to see is the overall framework of there being a God with a revelation, is that believable? And then once you have from that orientation, then you'll slot in the information and see if it's consistent or not consistent.
Beautiful, amazing. So one of the things I've always want to convey to people too is that a lot of people may think that the scientists have a discovery And then the rabbis are all getting together and backpedaling. It's like, how do we show this is what they discover in the Torah? It's not the case whatsoever. What's been happening for millennia now is scientists say, we now believe X to be true. We look into the Torah and say whether they're right or whether you need to keep working on it. You're not there yet. Because again, the scientists up before the discovery of the Big Bang was that the universe was internal and infinite. And we were right there saying, no, that's not true at all. And so, we can use the Torah to validate what the scientists are saying are accurate or not. It's the other way around, because we know the Torah came from the one, it's the blueprint of creation. So we know the source of it is the creator. So we can use that to validate what they know to be true or not true. And I will say this too, is that Rabbi Ari Wolbe, who I now know, Rabbi Padowitz, you learned with him at Kollel, which is amazing. Over last Sukkot, he always gives a nice share, a Torah share. But then something happened later on in the meal, and one of our friends that was there was talking about his heart condition that he had. He had to go into surgery. And Rabbi Ari Wolbe, has his EMT now because he's a volunteer for Hatzalah. And he went on to explain the precision of the electrical impulses from the heart. I don't remember it in detail. When he was done talking, I was like, that was the most amazing Torah I ever heard. Like, you're in awe of learning the intricacies of how Hashem created the human body. Or when I was reading your book, gentlemen, over Shabbos, like just seeing the beauty in the complexity, in the perfection of the way Hashem created the world. It creates such an awe of your creator. And it creates such gratitude as well, that we can sometimes take so much for granted. And I want to see if you could speak to that a little bit more, maybe add some more color on how much, and Maimonides talks about this, you have in your intro as well, is about learning about the world around you, the awe and love it creates for Hashem.
So Hashem, as we know, loves law. He gave us a law book, okay? And as we also know, he's created the whole universe with law. We have the laws of nature. We hope that our book will be like a start, at least a start, to understanding Hashem's creation a little bit deeper than, hey, isn't this amazing how many muscles are in the elephant's trunk, We hope we're going a little bit farther, a little bit deeper than that, okay? And understanding, let's put it like this. Somebody who looked at the nature is like, look how many muscles are on the elephant's trunk, is the same kind of person who approaches the Yiddishkeit as, it's great fun lighting Hanukkah candles, I get a good kick out of it. It's a great family occasion, okay? You're kind of, it's true, right? Okay, maybe you'll pass on the Masorah to your kids, but you're really missing the whole point of the law and the whole reasons behind it and the whole growth opportunity you have there. Okay? So science is, obviously it's lahavdil, right? We subtitle our book Parparas HaChokhmah, right? It's the dessert, okay? But it's the same, there's the same dynamic there, okay? If you can look at the laws of Hashem's creation on a deeper level and understand the beauty of how everything fits together, and having an appreciation of the chokhmah and the wisdom on a much deeper level than you would normally find in these religion and science books, okay, then it also awakens inside of you a much deeper appreciation of Hashem, and the wisdom behind his creation. Okay, it's incredibly deep, and it's probably deeper than the human mind could ever fathom. If you follow what's going on in modern science these days, it really reminds me of the midrash about Hashem gave us the Torah. He gave us, was it 2 tefachim or 2 amos? And I forgot. And there's 2 amos in the middle that if you work very hard you'll get, and there's another 2 amos which you're never going to get. Okay, so we see the same thing in the science field. We're probably reaching towards the limits of what our intellect can possibly handle. Okay, but the beauty that we have and what we see and what we have there and what He's given us is just phenomenal. Anyway. We hope that this sefer will at least start people off on a journey to get to appreciate those depths.
Want to add to that, Rabbi Padowitz?
I would love to add that, yeah. But I like what Jonathan said. I do like it very much. There's a great line. Dennis Prager, he said, I don't remember the exact quotes, but I'll paraphrase him. He said, the religious people have the problem of trying to explain how there could be suffering in the world, but the non-religious people have the problem of explaining everything else. And we didn't take the tack of trying to. This book is nothing about proving anything to anybody. We're not out to answer the questions about how it could be true. I think if you're interested in figuring out a scientific proof today for the veracity of Hashem, the way to go is what they call the Goldilocks enigma, or how the world is, all the constants behind the universe are all so finely tuned to support intelligence, complex life. That seems like truly impossible by any measure if it's not intentional. There's just no reasonable explanation to the contrary. That's the crux of it. We don't go that direction. We basically, like Jonathan said, we're interested in, we think, listen, Hashem made this world which is based on these, it's incredible. There's just a few rules of nature which then play out to unfold to this incredible, menagerie of existence. And, if you take your two little fingers and kind of zoom in and zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, no matter how deeply you zoom into any detail, it's not even a fractal nature. The deeper you go, you're like, oh my gosh, there's this more and more and more amazing, specificity and technicality and precision and investment and details.
And complexity and subtlety.
The deeper you go, you're more and more blown away. And that, who do you think Hashem did that for? He didn't do that for the non-believers. He did that, he did that for us, exactly as the Rambam that you quoted. So you look and say, wow, this is amazing, and you kind of fall in love with Hashem. And my metaphor, and this is speaking to the people who, God revealed himself in three ways. The three ways is either through the Torah, through the natural world, and through Hashgacha, through history. Okay, there's really three ways he reveals himself. But the primary way we access and develop a relationship with Hashem is through the Torah, as it should be, because if you want to get to know someone, and the essence of the essence of the religion, of the purpose of existence, is to develop a relationship with God. So if you want to develop a relationship, you have to have mutual understanding. And how we understand what this infinite, unknowable, I can't even call it a being is. So he says, well, listen, I'm giving you a Torah, and this is, you learn the Torah, you understand how I think, how I feel, what's my value system, what's important to me, how I, my position on economics and on philosophy and that's great. So if you were going on a date with someone to get to know them better, you're going to say, well, what do you think about, what are your values, what do you think about philosophy and politics, and that's sort of what we're doing when you're learning the Torah. You're seeing this is Hashem's take on how things ought to be. So you're getting to know him through your Torah, but there's other aspects to relationship, right? So a second aspect of relationship we invest in is tefillah, that's prayer, right? It's not just a stranger we're getting to know. Like on a podcast, you're asking us where we're coming from, we're asking you, we're telling you, you're learning about us and how our world works, but you're not looking at our inner world. You want to know my inner world, you got to hear what are my hopes and my dreams and my fears and my aspirations. That's a different topic. That's a private conversation, and that's prayer, right? We have a private conversation with Hashem, and that's a lifelong prayer relationship where we confide in Hashem, and hopefully we have a meeting of the hearts. But there's a third element as well. And this is what I want to get to in terms of the science, which is, even if you're dating someone and it's a private date, so besides hearing their worldviews that are public, you also hear about their private aspirations and so on. But imagine if this person who you were dating, unbeknownst to you, is like the world's greatest artist, the world's most creative human being that ever walked the planet. And they write symphonies, and they make movies, and they write poetry, and they paint multimedia, and you had never seen one of their artworks or heard one of their sonatas, so you haven't got a glimpse of a major facet of this person, right? You have, as much as you know about their politics, and their worldview and their values and even their aspirations. There's a whole world that you're not privy to if you haven't read their plays and watched, their productions. So Hashem has put on this planet, this universe, a universe that's full of so much amazing things. And if you just look under the hood and just peel away details anywhere, how the body works, how the world works, how a chemical works. I have a daughter studying biochemistry. She has a whole semester on just metabolic pathways, and it's mighty complicated. That's just one little thing going on in your body. So you get to appreciate, wow, Hashem is unbelievable as a creative genius. You jump, you go scuba diving, you see there's 50,000 different types of fish and so on and so forth. So what we try to do in this book here, and we think is to the point that you're bringing out, is that if you want to really appreciate the creative genius, the love Hashem has for us, the detail and investment put into making a world, it's not just a simple thing. The deeper you probe, the more amazing it becomes. So, in our book, we have 8th graders in mind too, so we only do one level down, but there's so much amazing stuff, even one level down. We hope that is really, for the average person, that's enough to get super excited about, falling in love with Hashem all over again.
Perfect. I want to talk a little bit about the application of Torah and how it's so necessary to understand the world around you for its application. I know when I first started learning and I wanted to start saying the brachas, it was amazing how ignorant I was about where all these different foods come from. I'm studying the brachas right now with someone who's new to Torah, and he's going through it for the first time. And he was just like you don't even stop and think about that. And from the beginning, can you sort of discuss, even before like all the technology, just like, over the millennia, just in order to learn how to apply Torah, if you could give some examples of why it's so necessary for a Jew to sort of have a working knowledge of how the world works around them.
It exists on two levels. You have to think about your everyday Jew who has to navigate life, and let's call him your rabbi, your expert Jew who has to navigate the 10 galleries of halakhic rulings. So, there's I think a well-known piece of Gemara. It says that Rav was the greatest of the generation after Rabbi Nasi, the author of the Mishnah. I know you've got the Mishnah lesson from Rabbi Sphiro recently. So the next generation, Rav, he was the greatest around. So it says Rav took 18 months to live with the herdsmen to understand, how baby cattle, they're blemished and what blemishes stick around and so on. That's like a technical thing. You're going to be having to rule about, fertility treatments. You got to know a lot of detail about how these things work. That's nitty gritty. And I think that's important, but that's for a specialist. I don't think every Jew doesn't have to be a specialist in this. You don't have to be a specialist in science to be a good Jew. You have to be a great Jew. But like you said, you have to at least have some level of understanding. And that's, I think it's reinforced just in the most basic halachas. You're talking about brachos. So, when you make bracha, people don't realize when you hold your bread to make hamotzi, so you're supposed to put 10 fingers on the bread. That's a rule. That's halacha. Why? Because let's remember that 10 steps went into making this, from the plowing and the planting and the harvesting. Everything's a process, and you have to appreciate the process. Don't just look at the end. So there's the BBC in England every April 1st, they run like a April Fool's Day joke. So one year, this is before my time, but in one year they showed the spaghetti farmers harvesting spaghetti off the trees. And my friend's father, who's an adult, mature, intelligent, educated, successful person, he really thought spaghetti grew on trees because of that BBC because he knows the joke. He walked through life thinking spaghetti grew on trees. Until his wife told him, no, this is, So you need to, if you want to be just a basic Jew who's, Chazal wants you to appreciate the different types of food that there are, because for the very reason we discussed before, it's a complex world and you want it. And you have to know that this grow on the different levels. If you're talking about just a basic example, the questions come, is this a Borei Priya Eitz? Is this a tree fruit? Or is this a Borei Priya Dama? Is this not a tree fruit? And that's important. Why is it important? Like, who cares? Who cares? Just, And in fact, if you say Borei Priya Dama after the fact, anyways, you've done your blessing. But there's something really amazing. Just imagine if you're a farmer. Nowadays, fruit, who cares? It comes from the grocery store. It's all the same to us, right? There's no things winter and summer fruits, and there's no. But if you're a farmer, imagine the difference between having to plow and plant and weed every single year for your vegetables and your grains, as opposed to the magic of a tree. You build an apple tree and then you just come back, and every year the apples waiting for you by themselves. It's like a candy machine. And so tree fruits are a much more amazing gift of Hashem, if you will, than the non-tree fruits. So the plants that grow on the fruits that grow on trees that are perennial, that live from year to year, from the same branch produces fruits year after year. You're meant to appreciate that much more because it's a much more complex machine. It's a food giving machine, as opposed to having to plant your onions every year and plant your potatoes every year and plant your tomatoes every year and so on. So, on that level, if you just understand how you make an onion, where onions come from, that makes a big difference. That makes a big difference. Just appreciation and your appreciation of God, and also the truth is, it makes a difference even to your learning too. I'll take just an example. So I don't know how many people learn like Mishnah and about the fruits and vegetables in Zeraim, but they talk about like imaho shel betzalim, literally means like the mothers of onions. So if you never said it before, so that doesn't mean much to you, but they talk about what would be the blessing behind eating one of those. And if you don't know how it works, you wouldn't know even what that's even talking about. The answer is onions, for example. Onions are a biennial crop, and it takes 2 years to grow onions. So in the first year, you put the seed in the ground and it makes a bulb, we like called the onion. And in the second year, the bulb makes new flowers. You can harvest new seed and you can plant. So after 1 year, you've just got the bulbs in the ground. So you wouldn't. The Talmud talks about these kind of things all the time. If you don't know how onions work and how it's a 2-year crop, you won't make any sense of these mishnahs whatsoever, and so on. So for all these reasons, there's lots of your average Jew who's meant to know the Mishnah. That's a basic expectation, even without the science, and it's just good old-fashioned Mishnah. You need basic scientific understanding just to understand and appreciate the Torah and how to function.
Joel, talk about Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon, why doesn't water gives you sustenance?
But you want to speak about it, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's a chapter in our book, right? So it's not an. Oh, okay. So there's an opinion in the Mishnah, which Joel wrote up very nicely about. Rabbi Tarfon says that we don't say shakal on water, and we do say brain nefashot. Which the Mefarshim explained that what essentially is Rabbi Tarfon saying is that water doesn't give you any sustenance, but we do need water to survive. Okay, so what's going on there? Okay? How do you put those two together? So, we have a whole chapter on that. What does it mean by water doesn't give you any sustenance? We go into a little bit of chemistry that water has no carbon atoms inside of it, so you can't burn it, so you can't get any energy out of it. And, all the other food that we have is carbon-based and gives us energy. Okay, so that's why water doesn't have any sustenance, but without water we can't survive, So we speak about how essential water is for a myriad of processes inside our body, and we go into a few of those as well to give you an idea of that, and that that's scientific background there is very helpful for understanding Rabbi Tarfon and the Mishnah.
Perfect. Yeah, I was bouncing around a lot on different areas of this, and I was going to ask you guys to speak about that. But, it's a mitzvah to take care of your physical health. So in order to fulfill that mitzvah, you have to have some understanding of how you keep your body healthy and how it works and how different foods, influence the body and are healthy for it. I made a joke on the Insider podcast I did with Rabbi Yokov Wolbe and Rabbi Busko. The topic was everything you need to know to be from that's not in the Shulchan Aruch. And I was just talking about all the cultural stuff that you get hit with that I sort of wanted to tell the listeners in advance. And one of the things I thought was so funny was right before I moved down here, I was reading an article about the high percentage of Ashkenazi Jewish men who have Crohn's disease. And the scientists are trying to figure out what was causing it. And they believe it's a genetic disorder. And after the first week I was here, after I was on all the WhatsApp community groups, Friday morning, I wake up and all the badges are lit up and they were all the same thing coming out between 11 p.m. and midnight. And they're all the same message. Trulant is served. And I was just guys, it's not a genetic disorder. You guys have a seriously diet disorder. And I thought it was so funny about the influence of trulant in the world, but keeping care of our body is a mitzvah. And I think that's beautiful. You sort of really go into everything that takes place. I think it's a good example of why understanding things like biology and how the body works is so imperative in order to fulfill the Torah properly. You guys want to add to that at all?
I would like to add this, that the first we talked about is sort of the skepticism that many different people have towards, the scientific information. So I don't want to pick any specific examples because each one, of course, becomes controversial, but not for a good reason, but they are controversial. But the reason why this is happening and people are making bad health decisions, like eating too much cholent on a Thursday night, is because they actually are uninformed. If they would have a basic understanding of how nutrition works, or how etiology, the spread of disease works, or how all these different things, what smoking does to you and drinking does to you, and then people would
exercise.
Exercise, yeah, the exact exercise, for sure. Then they would make better life decisions, and that really would be to everyone's benefit. Obviously, you want to live, as you said, the mandate to be shomer nafsho seichem, to guard your souls requires making informed decisions. There is such a principle of shomer pesayim Hashem, God protects the fools, and maybe unfortunately lots of people are falling under that category of just being a pesi, of being a fool, and therefore Hashem will protect them anyways. But that's obviously irresponsible. A responsible hishtadlus requires you to have a basic understanding of what it means, what the sleep you need, the air you need, the hydration you need, the nutrition you need, the exercise you need. It's not so complicated, but it's going to take a few hours. You got to do a little bit of understanding, and people will be a lot better off for it. And there's a big problem, I think, if you don't trust science altogether. So then, like, who cares what the scientists say? They're just out to make you, then you don't get off the ground. As you said, it's super important for people to live long, healthy, productive lives. They understand how their bodies work and how the bodies interact with various chemicals and so on, how it works.
There is a bit of a challenge because for Jews who are not brought up around Torah, they think that the world operates independently of a creator and it's just all random variables. So therefore, they're obsessed with health. And we know that, in the end, Hashem controls everything. It's a question of how much effort. Like one of the things, like Rabbi Berkowitz, learning from Rabbi Ari Wolbe, he said, that his students asked, like, when do you actually learn Torah? Because you're like starting early in the morning and you're going to bed at midnight. Like, when do you learn Torah? It's like, I think he says something like he wakes up at 3 a.m.
Well, Berkowitz sleeps from 10 to 2. 10 to 2, and then from 2 o'clock he learns until next. Yeah, that was his schedule for many, many years. I don't know if he's still doing that, but that was his schedule. Yeah.
So there, I tell people, like, when, even though the Shulchan Aruch says you need 7.5 to 8 hours sleep, when someone's that devoted on that level, Hashem says, you know what, for him, 3 hours will equal 8 hours. So there, and it's good that Jews have that type of realization that the Hashem's controlling everything, but there's this balance. It's just like with livelihood. And I like to discuss that a little bit too, is that we have to put our effort in, but know that Hashem's controlling the outcome. With our health, we have to put our effort in. Hashem's controlling the outcome. I know a lot of people that were totally dedicated to physical exercise, ate everything perfectly, exercised perfectly, and died from cancer when they were like 32 years old. So in the end, he's controlling everything. So let's sort of take that as a segue and sort of wrap up talking about livelihood, because I love being around like a school when people that have emunah and know, like, it all comes from Hashem. It all comes from Hashem. And I say, yes, absolutely 100%. But it comes from Hashem through natural means. When you guys were in yeshiva, praying to Hashem, like, help fund the yeshiva, and Hashem calls bags of money to come floating down from the heavens at the front door, right? You had to call people in commerce and ask, would you support our yeshiva, right? So that's another element too of the education. But talk about that as well as making sure that the sciences, mathematics are part of our young people's curriculum.
We just read Parsha Saman last Tuesday, right, for our Parnasa, and probably the most a Rav spoke in the shul this Shabbos, explaining the most important pasuk in Parsha Saman is the one about the person who gathered a lot came back and measured, and he had the same amount as the person who gathered a little. They all ended up with an omer. Okay, so it's a lesson in not going crazy about your hishtadlus. Okay. On the other hand, if you sat in your tent and did nothing, you wouldn't have anything. You have to go out and get your omer. Okay. It's true that those people who were at a very high level didn't have to go very far, but I don't know how many people these days fit that description. The vast majority of the Yehudim, need to go out and collect their omer, and they shouldn't go crazy about it because they'll end up with the same amount at the end. But you have to do your hishtadlus. Even the midbar, even the Dor HaMidbar had to do the hishtadlus.
Perfect.
Right.
You want to add to that, Rabbi Padowitz?
I would like to add, if you don't mind, also. Sorry.
Please.
So, in terms of the balance between hishtadlus and bitachon, making the effort versus relying on Hashem, there isn't really a one-size-fits-all. There just isn't. And there's such a thing as being someone who truly believes with all his heart that he can sit and learn and be supported. And in fact, the Rambam in the halacha says, in Hilchos Shmita Yovel, he says that person, Hashem will take care of him. It's a thing. I don't want to suggest that you need some sort of science education or whatever it is in order to be that's a wrong equation. But I would like to suggest, just from a different angle, that there are plenty of people who, and I think it's probably most people listening in, who already, it's a foregone conclusion, they don't intend to make a living by praying and studying. They intend to get a job, and they expect that's what they expect to do. They expect to live in that level of nature, that they're going to get a job and their children will get jobs, and that's how they support themselves. Like most of the world operates like that. Now, in the 21st century, if you're going to be getting a job, so you want to have not just your job opportunities open to you. But you want to have a job that is on some level fulfilling, meaningful, that you feel like you're making a contribution. And in a 21st century world where automation and artificial intelligence and robots can do so much that by themselves, so your contribution, to feel you have a contribution in this world, you need to be have some specialty in something that you can contribute, that you can give over. And if you don't have any understanding of the world around you works, that's not a possibility for you, which I think is a great disservice. The disservice is to not make that an opportunity and a possibility for people, especially young people. So everyone is certainly within their rights and in the proper shkafa to figure out how they're going to support themselves. And again, it's not a new topic. This has been around for a long time. Rabbeinu Bachai and the Chovos Lavos, everyone talks about it. But the bottom line is that if people people have a basic understanding of the natural world around them, as well as mathematics and computers, then their options of getting meaningful employment, not just that can support their family, but also in a way that they can feel that they're doing something that's contributed to society in terms of their employment, is very limited. And again, there's no one size fits all in this either. People can become lawyers and accountants and all the first thing about sciences. But at least it should be made, we should see to it in our communities, the possibility is there that if someone like me as a young child and as Jonathan as a young child, were drawn towards the sciences, that there should be a possibility we can get that education enough to work in those fields.
Perfect. Beautiful. All right. So what is the plan now with this book? Are you bringing it to schools and showing it to the educators and seeing if they'll sort of adapt this as part of their curriculum? What's the overall sort of game plan here to sort of get this wisdom out there?
So first of all, we're in the process of writing volume 2, which is on the second Shabbos, and which will cover some very important subjects which weren't covered in the first volume. I mean, there's no end to this, obviously, but we're covering things like energy, which is a very important scientific principle and unifying principle across the whole scientific field. We'll put more emphasis on that in the second volume and other subjects like that. But we would love to have a dialogue with educators to know how they can use this book and how we can help them use this book. I mean, we know we're in at least a couple of schools, maybe more. We haven't been able to really have a dialogue about how we could help educators use this book. And we have a free teaching aid, which we're happy to give out to anybody who needs it. We're working to get into schools, but it's a bit of an uphill battle. It was much easier to get to sell to the general public, and that's how it should be. Our Rebbeim should be very defensive of what comes into schools. We understand that, and this book isn't really written to fulfill any particular curriculum. It's more of a book which could help students connect with the curriculum and to appreciate what they're learning better, both the Mishnah and the science. It's not, custom made for, the New York exams, what those things are called. But we would love educators to reach out to us and tell us how we could improve this product and how they could, how we could help them use this product in their schools.
What I love about this book, I think it's a beautiful textbook, and if you have the test and the things that the instructor would need to teach it to the class, the reason I love this format is because it's not, my wife's a kindergarten teacher at the school here. They have Torah studies and then they have general studies. And it's like it's Torah. It's also science. You're combining it. And I think that's creating the right mindset for young Jewish people as in their learning process.
It's we focus largely, like as Jonathan said, on the sort of the retail market, people buying for their children and bar mitzvah products, gifts and that. So, but really, all your listeners really can check out the book. We have a website. We've invested a lot in that website. Website is sciencebehindthemishnah.com, and Mishnah spelled in H, sciencebehindthemishnah.com. And as Jonathan said, we are working exactly as you described. Right now, the book provides the experience that your students had about the sukkah, saying, you need geometry. So you'll see as you open the books here, how you need to have physical science and earth science and chemistry to understand things in Torah. But ultimately, we are putting together exactly described a teacher's guide that has quizzes and vocabulary lists. So it's for actual practical use in the classroom for those who want to use it as a course book, as a textbook in the classroom. And we look forward to being a resource to anybody, and we sort of are so flexible and trying to figure out how we can best serve the day schools around the world, Jewish day schools around the world.
Yeah, I will add, it's not like this is something that you sit back and wait for it to appear in your day schools. I love this book. I learned so much, and it has great diagrams, explains all the concepts. It's set up to where you can either go in order or you can go by topic. And I'm learned a lot. So it's not like it's just for your 13-year-old child. This is a great book that I think parents reading it with their children will find out they're learning quite a bit as well. So I wish you a lot of success. I will have links to their website, links to purchase the books in the show notes. It was great to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting Torch so they can continue to spread Torah wisdom to the world by making a donation at torchweb.org and clicking donate in the top right corner of the page.